Good evening and welcome all to our virtual Cobourg and District Historical Society webinar entitled The Cobourg Conspiracy of 1839. My name is Brian Murphy and I'll be your host for this evening. Webinars will not replace face-to-face meetings, but is the next best thing we can do to stay connected during COVID-19. We want you to stay safe during these times. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Leona Woods, who will introduce our speakers. Leona?
Thank you, Brian. I'm pleased to introduce a small group of volunteers from the Cobourg Museum Foundation, who are the heart, soul, and creative minds behind the Cobourg Conspiracy, a page from the history of this town that many know nothing about. That will change by the end of the evening. First, Alan Seymour. Alan grew up just north of Cobourg and pursued his career in the GTA in manufacturing management, logistics consulting, and contracting. He retired here with his wife, Kathy, 4 years ago. Al founded 3 charities and so is a committed volunteer. He is a Cobourg Museum Foundation board member and was the coordinator of the Cobourg Conspiracy Project. He is also working on the Foundation's dinner theater play for the fall of 2022 and the museum's 2023 theme of immigration. Next is Anne Burnham, the researcher, who has spent her life on the outskirts of Cobourg. Managing Burnham Family Farm Market is her biggest career achievement, but the achievement that makes her most proud is her 4 children and 3 grandchildren. Music and local history have been her lifelong hobbies. Jenny Duda, the artist, was born and raised in Cobourg, studied at the OCA, and worked in Toronto as a freelance artist in the international advertising and publishing industries for clients including McDonald's and Coca-Cola. After further study at Queen's, she returned to Cobourg to raise her family and work part-time in education. After 27 years, she retired from teaching and continues to work freelance. You may have seen 2 of her community art projects, the 21 by 8-foot spiritual room mural at Ed's house and the Heart Fence projects. She was drawn to this particular project after visiting the Sifton Cook Museum. Bill Hunt, the Voice, and his wife Janet moved to Port Hope from Whitby 5 years ago after the purchase of a designated historical home in Cobourg fell through. Bill spent 30 years in the cable and broadcast industry and then became a voice actor. He is currently the image brand voice for Accessible Media Television, a national broadcast service for the visually impaired, and has voiced commercials, television documentaries, and corporate narrations for broadcasters such as Global, CTV, TSN, the Food Network, NBC, and PBS, and has voiced for companies such as Budweiser, American Cruise Lines, the Ontario government, Participation, and Barilla Foods. He made history come alive in 26 radio episodes set at Montgomery's Tavern years ago. And Mark Edwardson, the videographer, came to Cobourg in 1990 after a career in computers and business forums that took him from his birthplace in Sudbury to North Bay and Toronto. After retiring from the data group in 2012, he used his skills at putting video projects together for the VOS, Cobourg Concert Band, Oriana Singers, La Jeunesse, and other groups around town. His wife, Kathy Burnham, is Anne Burnham's sister-in-law, and that connection introduced him to the Cobourg Conspiracy Project. Welcome, panelists, and we look forward to your sharing your passion for this project with us this evening. And now I'll turn it over to Alan.
Leona, thank you so much for those kind introductions for me and the rest of the panelists. It's really appreciated. Okay, what I'd like to do is do a quick review of where we were historically in 1839. So the following are some of the events and people leading up to the Cobourg Conspiracy of July 1839. The firebrand William Lyon Mackenzie, who kicked off the Upper Canada Rebellion with his march on Toronto and standoff at Montgomery's Tavern on December 7th, 1837, had escaped to Navy Island in the Niagara River on the American side. Mackenzie's supply ship, the Caroline, was captured and sent over the falls by British Navy on December the 29th, 1837. The now USA-based rebels wanted revenge. John Montgomery escaped on his way to the Kingston Penitentiary and wound up in Rochester. 2 leaders from Mackenzie's uprising were hanged, and 92 of the captured were sent to Australian penal colonies. By early 1839, William Lyon was publishing Mackenzie's Gazette in Rochester, New York. On June 21st, 1839, he began a 1.5-year jail sentence in Rochester for breaking the Neutrality Act between the USA and the British colonies. The family compact, which Mackenzie had opposed, was still intact, but that would not be for long. In Quebec, Louis-Joseph Papineau, leader of the Lower Canada Rebellion, the Conseil des Patriotes, was in exile in New York City and soon after relocated to France, where he remained until 1845. The last of the Patriot rebels were hanged in early 1839. The Governor General of the Canadas, Archibald Acheson, Lord Gosford, resigned in the fall of 1837 when he couldn't prevent the Lower Canada Rebellion outbreak. He was replaced by John Lambton, Lord Durham. Upper and Lower Canada would soon be merged based on Durham's 1839 report. On February 22nd, that's interesting, 1838, between 1,500 and 2,500 patriots of the Hunters' Lodges gathered on the south side of the St. Lawrence River near Clayton, New York. They crossed the border onto Hickory Island with the intent of capturing Kingston. The poorly trained patriots were led by Rensselaer Van Rensselaer and pirate Bill Johnson and supported by Mackenzie. Their numbers dwindled quickly when realizing that they were facing well-trained militia and they were suffering from the biting cold on Hickory Island. The Kingston forces were led by Richard Bonnycastle, commandant for Port Henry, who led the militia to Hickory Island. They found the hunters had abandoned their invasion. 5 farmers were arrested. The Bill Johnson pirate gang, operating in the Thousand Islands on May 26, 1838, commandeered the steamer Robert Peel at night, robbing the passengers in their night clothes, left them on an island, and burned the boat into the St. Lawrence River, where it remains today. A week later, they raided Amherst Island, engaging the Preston family in a shootout in their home. The Battle of Windmill Point at Prescott took place on November 12, 1838, with a victory of British regulars and militia of 1,100 plus over the 250 Hunter patriots who had crossed over from New York State. Niels Van Schultz and 10 other conspirators were hanged at the Kingston prison. 60 were shipped to Australian penal colonies. Others were acquitted. And the raiders were represented by young lawyer John A. MacDonald. Bill Johnson, a collaborator, remained at large until his arrest in late 1839. The Battle of Windsor occurred in December 1838 with a local militia defeating about 150 Mackenzie supporters. By the spring of 1839, fighting had ceased, but the people of Upper Canada were on edge, fearing an American invasion at any time. There were still grievances to be resolved, and many were plotting on both sides of the border, including Samuel Hart and Ben Lett. The Cobourg Conspiracy.
Good day. Let me introduce myself. I am Samuel Hart, and I'm here today to tell you some history of which I was a part. I used to live in Cobourg and ran a little political paper called The Weevil. Then in 1836, I was in Belleville, publishing a paper called The Plain Speaker. I like to tell it like it is. Belleville, I ran into some trouble. Before I tell you too much about that, Let's give you some background information. Let's begin by talking about the 1837 rebellion centered around Montgomery's Tavern in Toronto. William Lyon Mackenzie and other reform-minded pot-stirrers desperately wanted some change in our government. Although the 1837 rebellion was not successful in creating immediate change, its ripple effects lasted for years and did eventually bring about responsible government. In the meantime, there was a lot of unrest in Upper Canada, and I was a part of that. Another person involved in making history at this time was a young man from Darlington Township named Benjamin Lett. I would describe him as a dangerous, queer man to have a difference with. After the 1837 rebellion, Ben made his way to the United States, where there were a collection of patriots with a need for vengeful action. Ben Lett was part of raids and attacks on Navy Island, Fighting Island, Pelee Island, and took part in the murder of Captain Edgeworth Usher, all in the year 1838. In early 1839, Ben Lett attempted to burn the British fleet lying in the Kingston Harbor. I tell you all this to cement his reputation as one who was fearless and unscrupulous. I learned to fear him greatly. Meanwhile, Lord Durham, our Governor-General, handed in a report to his bosses, the British government. He suggested that Canada would not rest until it had responsible government. Although the British government rejected Lord Durham's recommendations, the people of Canada took note, and word of Lord Durham's report began to spread throughout the countryside. In 1839, Canada was not yet a nation with July 1st as its national holiday, but on that date in Haldimand Township, a group of about 300 reform-minded citizens held a Durham meeting to discuss the meaning of Lord Durham's report and the status of reform. This meeting was entirely peaceful. Not so was the Durham meeting a week later in Cobourg. A number of those who had been at the Haldimand-Durham meeting were now at the Cobourg Town Hall. Speeches had barely begun when the proceedings turned violent. In preparation for this event, some well-known rabble-rousers were asked to attend and stir things up, likely Irish Orangemen. Although a reformer drew a pistol in protest, the Durham region flag was stomped on and torn to shreds. Shillelaghs were pointed threateningly. Stones were thrown and the crowd dispersed. A wagon load of reformers were harassed as they tried to leave town until the reformers fired a shot into the air. After that, folks let them leave peaceably. I was, at that time, in the United States. I was plotting and planning revenge with some patriots I found there in New York State. You see, one day my newspaper came out with the British coat of arms upside down. Thinking I had done this on purpose, a gang broke into my printing office and smashed my printing press. They dragged me out into the street through the mud and slush, making me a laughingstock of the community. I fled to New York State as soon as I could. I said in New York, I found like-minded people. I started writing again over there, and I found there was a good audience for my words. But this wasn't enough to clean my slate. I needed to go skulking, cause some real damage. In July of 1839, I got my chance. I met up with my old pal Henry J. Moon at Montgomery's boarding house in Rochester. Yes, this was the same Montgomery of the 1837 Rebellion Tavern. I said to Henry, "Henry, do you want to make some money?" Henry says, "Yes," and I fill him in on my plan. We need a boat and a place to attack from, etc., etc. I sent Henry back to Cobourg to pull some strings for me while I secured a boat. On July 26, 1839, all the pieces were in place for my plan. Captain Terry and the schooner known as the Guernsey would take us to Cobourg. Me and my new friends, William Baker, Edward Kennedy, Peter Wilkins, Henry Wilson, and Benjamin Lett. One thing about Ben Lett, Jesus Murphy, he was loaded down with weapons. He wore 4 blinking pistols around his belt along with his trusty Bowie knife. I gotta say that the only thing Ben Lett trusted were his weapons. We had a trunkload of ammunition and armaments, and I made the fellas practice their skills as we sailed across Lake Ontario. I also went over the plans, which had been changed a little by my accomplices. They all had their own malicious needs. So, for one, we would murder Shepard McCormick for putting an end to the Patriot supply ship, the Caroline. We were excited to rob Squire Henry's bank on College Street, and then we would set fire to the whole ugly Tory-filled town. A beautiful feeling comes over me, even now when I think of it. Landing ashore so early on July 28th meant we could sneak away to the homes of our sympathetic friends, Joseph Ashe Sr. and Jr. They knew our secret knock. We were let into their warm family homes. Henry Moon had arranged all of this ahead of time for us. Once safe at the Ashe farm, we went over the plans again. Dissension appeared in the ranks. No one could agree on how we would escape after burning the town. Finally, the plan was to steal Downer's schooner, which was tied up on the shore. "Let's rob Maurice Janes," they said next. Ben Lett was ready to rob him right then and there, but the others wouldn't let him go until they decided what bag would be best to use. Then they had to discuss should the Janes family be forced to lie on the floor or called out of the house one by one. After robbing Janes, they wanted to murder either George or Darcy Bolton, or maybe both. Fine with me, Tory bastards. Then we could rob Squire Henry's bank, kill him if we needed to, 'cause he wore his keys around his neck, burn the town, and enjoy the rest of our lives. At this point, we sent Henry off on his horse to see if he could get us a wagon to carry all our plunder to Downer's boat. When he came back, he had us a wagon, but we had to sit on our hands for another 24 hours until the wagon was available. It's laughable to look back on this costly turn of events. We had to wait and endanger ourselves for a stupid wagon. I had no idea where Moon was the next day, but I later heard he was having tea with his wife and his friend Spragg, newly signed up to aid us. Kennedy also was last seen here at this wee tea party. It was here that the first traitorous thoughts formed in Henry Moon's mind. He talked Spragg out of helping us and scared poor Kennedy such that he saw the light and escaped. Would that I had done the same. Moon's cold feet took him over to Bolton's house where he revealed all our plans. Secretly, I think Moon was just terrified of Ben Lett. I know I was. But I couldn't let it show, and I had no time to think about it. I spent all my time going over the plan and over the plan again, and making sure my band of misfits was still together. And so it was that before we could get going that Monday night, with our long-awaited wagon, we were surrounded. Some of us were at Joe Senior's and some at Joe Junior's. We were no match for the militiamen on their trained horses. We were tied up in no time. Except for Ben Lett, of course. He had a nose for danger, unlike any of the rest of us, and he escaped through a window before he could be caught. He lived to do more damage in the province, but that's another story, not mine. They arrested all 6 of us, 3 Canadians and 3 Americans. They took us to the Cobourg jail, where we lived in a bit of hell until our trial on September 13th, 1839. They let Miles Luke go. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He got off lucky. We heard, whilst we was in jail, the town was all afeard. We heard they wrote to Sir George Arthur asking for help because the bad guys that escaped could still be lurking and waiting to burn down the town. That thought at least brought me a bit of pleasure. The town had to write the governor twice before he sent 80 militiamen to hang about town until our trial. Our trial was led by Judge Jones, supposedly a magistrate with high standing and experience. William Henry Draper, the province's attorney general, also attended the trial. Hey, we must have done something big to rate the top legal cheese. 2 local magistrates also assisted Judge Jones. They were Zacchaeus Burnham and Walter Boswell. A jury of 12 men of the very type I wanted to erase from the face of the earth stared at us for the whole 17 hours of the trial. I hated them all. Best part of the trial was when Henry Moon's own brother-in-law was in the stand. I can still hear him say, "You may judge what Henry is." He was first a Methodist, then a Baptist, next an infidel, and now a traitor. It was the best laugh of a very funny trial. It was noted by the clerk that I had a great deal of levity during the whole proceedings. Why not? The whole thing was a mess from start to finish. I either laughed or I would cry. The next day, our sentences were passed. We all pleaded not guilty. The jury didn't agree. The 3 Americans could not be charged with treason, but Joseph Ashe Sr. was sentenced to 6 months in jail and £100 fine. Joe Jr. was sentenced to 1 year in jail with £50 fine. And me? Why, they threw the book at me. I would spend 7 years in the rat-infested penitentiary for being the leader of the Cobourg Conspiracy. May God rot their Tory souls.
Okay, there we have it. Now, Ann Burnham has done some further research and has uncovered some very interesting facts about some of the characters of the Cobourg Conspiracy. So we'll let Ann take it over from here.
Now, most of my, the things that I'm going to reveal to you this evening concern Samuel Hart, the person who was telling you the story in the video of the Cobourg Conspiracy, and I feel it was the leader of the whole affair. I'm going to start with this little piece, which is taken out of the Peterborough Examiner from their website, and it talks about the publication, The Plain Speaker, which Samuel Hart was the editor of. And they mention a certain article that was making fun of Peterborough at the time. So this illustrates both that his publications were, you know, they went a little farther afield than just Cobourg or Belleville, where he was writing these things. And it also hints at the style he used of satire or stinging criticism of. So Peterborough was feeling a little hurt by the article that was in this particular issue of the Plain Speaker in the 1830s. Before this would be before the Cobourg Conspiracy. All right, next slide, please. So it wasn't easy to begin to grab onto. My main source for everything was this book here by the historian Edwin Guillet, and he's a great source. He was a history professor, and he had Cobourg ties, and so he knew a lot about Cobourg. But to go further into these characters and really build their life stories, it took some digging. So one of the things that was very helpful to find was this particular notice of the marriage of Samuel P. Hart to Louisa Levers. I'll guess that's how you pronounce her name. And they got married in the Johnstown is in the Kingston area, and they were married in 1832. So now I had her name, and that was something else that you could put out there to search for. All right, next slide, please. In the Library and Archives Canada website, I did find this mention of a holding that they have, and I have requested a copy of that, but with COVID and them not working at their in-house at their jobs, we have to wait a little bit to get this file, and I don't have no idea even how big it is, but it looked interesting. But it did confirm for me where they were imprisoned, and that Samuel Hart went to Kingston Penitentiary. Next slide, please. I was able to find in the 1842 census, also at the Library and Archives website. This is the Hamilton Township / Cobourg census of 1842, and 2/3 of the way down, you can see Louisa Hart. So instead of mentioning a man in the family, she was there with her name, and she was a school keeper at the time. So this fits perfectly with the fact that he would be in jail and she would be living on her own at this time. So, and it gives you a clue as to how she made ends meet while her husband was in jail. Next slide, please. This was the big find for me, and really filled in some of the story. You can see down at the bottom there, there's a little newspaper clipping, and that is the obituary for Mrs. Louisa Hart, Samuel Hart's wife. And so it tells the story, it gives some dates even as to when they moved around. And I think there's a bit of fanciful thinking in here as well. She talks about her health not being good, so they had to move out of Ontario, but I think it was to escape the when you come out of jail, you know, you're not exactly the neighbor of choice. So I think they chose to move, and they ended up in Indiana, and then after a while in Kansas. So this really clinched a lot of details for me, made it very, very good. But let's keep thinking of them being in Indiana for a minute, because the next slide shows you something that happened. So we have to call him Dr. Samuel P. Hart now. I have not found anything that indicated that he got a legitimate medical degree or anything. He may have, I don't know. But in this year of 1856, he was convicted of rape of one of his patients. He was practicing mesmerism, which is a hypnotism of sorts, and magnetism on a patient, and 9 months later she had a baby. So he was accused of putting that baby in there, and he was sentenced to 10 years in the Michigan State Prison. Now, where he lived in Indiana was right at the border of Michigan. Next slide, please. So in 1859, he had served enough of his sentence, and he got out on good behavior. He had a certificate for his good character from someone, the Honorable S. Colfax, and he also was noted to be an assistant in the prison hospital. So out he got, and then off to Kansas they went, because they didn't want to stay around Michigan either, where his reputation wasn't so good. So next slide, please. So finding his death was something that I'd looked for early on, but I did find this note about Samuel P. Hart, who was born in Canada at the right time. And it was in San Francisco, and I thought, really, you know, like it could be somebody else. I mean, but because I had her obituary and the other members of the family, like their daughter and so forth, and I was able to find that the daughter of Louisa and Samuel was also living in San Francisco. So now it makes sense that he died in San Francisco in 1898. So I don't know that I'm done finding things about him, but I at least have a bit of a storyline for what happened after the Cobourg Conspiracy. This slide is showing you a model that Rob Hunter has created. It is taken after the drawing that Jenny did of the Ash home, and he has included a pigsty. So what we're going to do for this season, we are continuing a lot of our themes from last year and doing more with them and getting more hands-on things. So this is intended for children to play with, and there will be little figures for them to move around and take part in the arrest scene of the Cobourg Conspiracy. So also, one of the things that I found out about, one of the things in the video was that Miles Luke was arrested but let off because with just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I kind of found out why that might be, because he ended up marrying one of the Ash daughters shortly after the Cobourg Conspiracy. So he was here dating, and the whole town would have known that he was dating a daughter and said, "Get out of here, you're in love, you're not part of this conspiracy." So we hope you're able to come to the museum this year and see how we've continued on with the displays, including, oh, the conspiracy is just one of the stories we tell.
Good. Thank you, Anne. So Brian, shall I carry on with the questions for the rest of the panel?
Yeah, you carry on, Al, the questions to the panelists. And
Okay,
the panelists can probably turn on their cameras right now.
There we go. I'll start with Anne because she's the first one up on the sequence. Anne, what was the interest of the story that you wanted to dig deeper into and basically create the storyline? What was the hook, if you will?
Well, when the theme came up for the museum of heinous and heroic, I immediately thought of the Cobourg Conspiracy, because the late Colin Caldwell had written a series in the Cobourg paper, and he'd made a segmented series on the Cobourg Conspiracy, and I'd read each one with interest, and it's such a story, it sticks in your mind.
And you chose to tell the story from Samuel Hart's point of view. And why did you choose him?
He was really, I think, the brains to the operation. I think it was his idea to stir up trouble, and I think it was him that gathered the group around and kept them together. And I think he was the person with the most reason to commit a crime and the most intelligence to pull it off.
So did you have a sort of aha moment? It was some kind of fact that sort of really caught your attention?
I think what really caught my attention as I worked with the story was how comical it was in many ways. It just did not fall together well for these people. And they had a lot of trouble pulling it off, like the wagon incident, like having to wait a whole day for a wagon, things like that, and having arguments with your teammates about, oh, do we use this bag or do we use that bag? And it was just kind of funny. Make a good movie as well as this video.
Yeah. Any other comments? Anne?
No,
Okay.
it's a great story, and I'm really pleased with what we've done with it to retell it for our time.
Good. Okay, I'm going to move on to Jenny next because she was next in the sequence to make this. Jenny, tell us how you became part of this project.
I did some previous work for the Sifton Cook and doing like a mural drawing for the outside of a display at Sifton Cook. And I guess with the confidence of seeing that work, they had seen more of my portfolio, and a few people got in touch with me about doing it. So then I met with you and Anne to hear the story and see if it was something I wanted to illustrate. Yeah.
Good. So Jenny, can you tell us about the scenes you've got created and posted behind you, and how that
Okay.
process went?
Sure. So originally, the whole story was supposed to go into 5 panels, so that it would be 21 inches by 21 inches in the museum, and like a condensed version of the story. And when I met with Anne, she told me all the humorous details that were part of the story. And I thought, okay, wouldn't it be fun if we made it more like a graphic novel style, even like a comic book style, so that we include more than one image on each panel. So there were a few frames that happened on each panel. And I was given the freedom to add some speech bubbles to get across some of the ideas to support the story. And that's what happened. When I designed it simply so that it was going to be enlarged 4 times the size, but I never imagined that it was going to end up being in a video format. That only happened because of a pivot that we made during COVID. I did the drawings over the first 6 weeks of COVID. And when we realized that we couldn't have people come into the museum to do to see everything as a printed version, then that's when the story came in the video format. Yeah.
I have to ask my personal question. How do you keep the image of, let's say, Ben Lett consistent throughout all the different drawings you've put together?
Well, I studied a lot of graphic novels when I was looking into it. I made sure that there were certain details that I was consistent in each picture that showed him. But I had some books that I used that show various models and in different expressions. And I sort of pick one and then repeat it over and over and over again. So I can just tweak the character until it looks like Ben Lett or like Samuel Hart. Yeah.
Good. Any other comments you'd like to pass along to the viewers?
It was kind of fun to include the rat in each of the frames. And that was done so that any young people that were looking at the panels, they might be able to have a Where's Waldo moment by looking for the rat to hold their attention, because it is a historical story. But the thing about this story that is so intriguing is it does have murder. It has intriguing characters. It has bank robbery ideas. It has arson, and those are all really great things to hold everybody's attention. So with the plan of doing these drawings, I did have the possibility in the back of my mind that maybe it could possibly be a comic book that would be made into like a coloring book format, so that if it ended up in a high school or something, that we could show some local history to maybe grade 10s and let them enjoy the fun of the story.
Good, thank you. I'm going to move on to Bill. Bill, how did you become part of this project?
There we go. There we are.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry. Okay. Can you tell I work in audio and video?
So how did you become part of this project?
Sure. Well, there's a gentleman I know who's I believe still a member of your board. His name is Bill Lifeso, and I guess he had been part of a meeting where you had introduced this idea that each of you are talking about in terms of putting together a slightly more expanded version of the original thought on this story. And my understanding is that there was just the discussion as to who knew whom, and were there people out there who could possibly contribute. And Bill knew of my background and what I do now, and asked me if I'd be interested, and if so, that I'd end up speaking with you. And so it was as simple as that. I've always had an interest in history, as I think I've mentioned before, although not to everyone here. And at one time had produced somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 videos from Montgomery's Inn, all on Canadian antiques, preceding the Antiques Roadshow, by the way. And yeah, so it was just interesting to me, and I was glad that you got in touch, and I was happy to get involved and contribute.
So how do you get into Samuel Hart's shoes and become the character? Because now that I've heard the video a number of times, to me, your voice and his image are one and the same.
Poor Sam. You know, it's an interesting question. In my day-to-day life, I'm constantly told how someone wants to hear something. So this is for commercials or narrations or whatever. And there's very little opportunity to express what you're often feeling about the script you're reading, or the product you're dealing with, or the story you're trying to tell, because you're having to follow the direction of others and what they want to hear and what they have in their minds. So when you have an opportunity such as this to just figure it out for yourself, and you read the script, and particularly if the script is well written and colorful and has a great story, which this one does and is, you read it a few times, and if you know who it is you're supposed to be, he just kind of emerges, and the way he would tell a story. He was a newspaper man. He told stories. He was apparently a doctor, which I didn't know. And I'm sure he had some stories to tell there. Yeah, his character just sort of emerged, and that's great fun for me, because it's quite directly contrasted with my day-to-day activity. So that's how he came about.
Okay. Is there any studio techniques that you use for this video that might be different than something else you work on?
Sadly, the answer to that is no. There's no interesting story there. I have a home studio, which is absolutely necessary these days, because to go to Toronto or wherever to studios is dangerous, among other things. And so we've many of us in this business have been working from home. And to do that in this very competitive industry in which I work, you have to have broadcast quality, because if you don't, you're not able to land the jobs. So I am fortunate to have a very good quality studio, which allows me to record and edit and put together a very, very clean piece of audio, which is hopefully how that came across. And yeah, as I say, I'm just fortunate to have it, and am able to do these kinds of things without there being too much of an issue.
Good.
So,
any other comments you want to pass along to the viewers?
Well, just I will say quickly, and it's just a sort of a personal insight, with all the murder, mayhem, and mishaps created by poor planning and probably anxiety. I see a lot of parallels to our current world situation, and I found that fascinating. It helped me with the story. So just a
Great.
comment.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move along to Mark. How did you become part of this project?
You called me.
I guess I did.
Yeah, I know you were familiar with my work with some of the local choirs and.
In Elijah Ness, for example, yeah.
I had done DVDs and whatnot for them. And in those situations, I use multiple cameras and then I edit together into a nice little video for them. This was quite a different challenge that you brought to me. They were all stills. And normally I work with video where I can, pan my camera back and forth and around and that type of thing. But when I was presented with Jenny's 5 panels, I thought, how am I going to handle this now? So I ended up taking the 5 panels and I actually cropped out each individual panel that was within the 5 panels. And I was able to use them and put them all together with Bill's audio. And it was a little tough at first to make it flow because I had to be jumping back and forth to Samuel Hart and then back to where he's explaining what's going on. But Jenny's panels were very, very, let's say, bright, and I could put them into a high def situation. I was afraid at first that when I broke them out of the original panels that they would be too small to use, but no, they turned out okay.
So you used a lot of techniques like zooming across in and out on the characters. I also noticed, like, for example, the court scene where you pulled the judge and the other 2 magistrates out and brought that image closer. How's that? Is it like a cut and paste type of thing?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, that's my Pinnacle program. It's called Pinnacle and it's by Corel now. They've bought it from another company that I originally had it from. But no, it has an awful lot of good tools and it's a kind of a semi-professional editing program. And it gives me a lot of tools. I don't have anywhere near the professionalism that a person like Bill Hunt would have because I don't have the studio and that type of thing. I have to do it all at home. But no, there's a lot of tools in there. I can cut and paste and I can zoom in and pan across the panels as you saw in the video. And yeah, I can make it jump a little better than just, presenting a static panel. So I was lucky to be able to do that.
Well,
I thought he did a great job.
Well. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Great job. Any other comments you want to pass on to the viewers, Mark?
No, I'd just like to say thank you very much for tuning in. And these projects that the Historical Society does are very important to bring them to the youth of today. And I hope it generates a lot of activity around the town. Cobourg's a wonderful place, and I parachuted in here 30 years ago or so, and I'm still learning more and more interesting things about it. And part of that is from Ann Burnham. She's quite the go-getter when it comes to digging out the details and that type of thing. And yeah, kudos to everybody involved. I hope it goes out to the kids and they learn from it.
Great. Thank you, Mark, and everyone else. Brian, do you have some questions that's been coming through?
At this time, I'll ask again if anyone has any questions. So please identify your questions. Just type your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Maybe in the meantime, if someone wants to put a plug in for the Cobourg Museum Foundation again, I'm not too sure who can speak on that. But this presentation was put on thanks to the Cobourg Museum Foundation. Can you?
I think Leona and I could probably talk to that. I want to put a plug in for a dinner theater, which we are going to be announcing shortly for the end of September. And it's going to feature the characters of the Cobourg Conspiracy, plus the other characters that are in the current display of the heinous, heroic, and high flyers. And Michael Kajmin, who some of you may know was the director of Last Day, Last Hour in 2018, has put this time travel fantasy, good guys, bad guys play together, and it is absolutely lovely. So we're going to do this inside the barracks, where we have certainly ambiance, dinner at the Legion, and followed by the theater, and we'll have a good time with it. So watch out for the announcements. We have a number of actors already selected, and a producer has already stepped forward, and she's taking the ball and running with it. I know Leona's scrambling to get furniture and details for the dining side done, and it'll all come together.
It's going to be, I think it's going to be very exciting. And there are a lot of things that the Cobourg Museum Foundation is involved with. And every year they do a new show, if you like, with panels and take tours through the buildings. This year coming up, it is an expansion of last year's displays. And even with COVID, the Cobourg Museum Foundation volunteers had the museum open, and there were visitors Friday, Saturday, Sunday who came and took advantage of what was going on. So it's a wonderful gem of a place. And we get a lot of people walking in who simply are walking by in the Heritage District of Cobourg, see the barracks building and wonder what it is. And they're attracted to the building itself, but also to the miniature railroad that George Parker, one of the Historical Society members, has built. And he also has a very large display now in the east end of the building, capturing some of the railway history. So I wonder sometimes whether people in Cobourg, in fact, have been to the museum itself and have taken advantage of it. It reminds me of people who live near Niagara Falls. They may have gone once, but then they don't go back because they take it for granted. And so I think if you've been to the Cobourg Museum, the Sifton Cook Heritage Center once, you need to go back at least every year, but sometimes 2 or 3 times in the year to see how things have evolved. So I would encourage everyone to make a point of going and seeing the displays, and also to make a point of buying tickets to the dinner theater, which is going to be fabulous. So that's my plug.
Okay, thanks very much, Leona. Did you mention a date yet to Alan?
We're planning on September the 29th as our first show. It will run 8 shows over 2 weekends.
Okay. Thanks very much. There are some questions here, Alan, and I'll let you decide who can take them. It's from Dennis Carter Edwards. As chair of the program committee for the Peterborough Historical Society, I want to commend the group for their fine production and wondered what is next for the committee. I believe that migration was mentioned, which is key for the upcoming 200th anniversary of the 1825 Irish migration, which has an important Cobourg connection.
I should probably answer that one. One of the immigration groups we are working on right now is the 1847 migration, when we had over 5,000 refugees come through Cobourg on their way, many to Peterborough area. I'm working with the Canada Ireland Foundation, and we're putting together the story of some of the people who came through, some of the people who were making political decisions to help them, nurses, drivers, steamship operators, et cetera, et cetera. So that will be told at the Cobourg Museum next year, but the Canada Ireland Foundation would like to probably tell their story later this year because it's the 175th anniversary of that. And I realized that the 1820s was a different mix, but that story needs to be told as well.
Okay. From Reva Nelson, does anyone know what happened to all those men sent off to the penal colony of Australia? Any future prime ministers in that group?
I'm not sure. I think some of those men were released and came back. I think that's the same for the ones that were incarcerated in England and Ireland. So, but that would be interesting history to dig out to see what happened after their time in Tasmania or, the west coast of Australia where they're incarcerated.
Okay, and next one is why is from Rick Blackwell, why is there not a Hart Street in Cobourg? He is famous or infamous.
And do you want to tackle that one?
Unmute. I don't know. I don't think I don't know. I don't think you'd want someone with his story as a street name. There's lots of other choices. He didn't stay in Cobourg very long. He really wasn't here very long. Maybe 15 years.
Maybe we should petition the Cobourg Council for that, but I wouldn't support it either.
Okay, and Wayne Crossan, what subsequently happened to James Ashe and James Ashe Jr.? It is interesting that the Ashe family were United Empire loyalists, and yet James was clearly supportive of the Durhamites.
Yeah, I'm going to answer that one. The Ashe family, they did get lower sentences. They hosted these people, but it doesn't seem like they were really involved in the plot or going to be the ones that carried out the plotting. So there were a lot of people in Upper Canada at that time who were sympathetic to reform and changing the way that we were represented in government. So I don't think it's really that odd that they were, and they may not. Who knows whether they really understood what these gentlemen were about to do. It is not clear whether they were privy to their actual plotting. As to what happened to Joseph Ashe Sr. and Jr. after the conspiracy and after they got out of jail, which was quite quick. 1 year was 6 months and 1 year were their sentences. They stayed in the Cobourg area. They lived at the east side of Cobourg and for a little while, and then they moved to the Oshawa-Whitby area and remained there. So, and some of there were a lot of Ashes at the time, and some of those family lines are still in the area. And if anyone knows Ron Smith, he is an Ashe descendant of a different branch of the family, but yeah, related to those two, Joseph Sr. and Jr. Ashe.
Okay. I'd like to comment, Anne, too. If there are some of our viewers who have ancestors that are tied to the Cobourg conspiracy characters, I think it'd be great if you could pass along some family information. We just add that to the collection of all these good stories.
Mm-hmm. I am trying to put together biographies of the people that were involved in the conspiracy, both those that were conspiring and those who were part of the trial, the jury people, etc. I just think it's a great opportunity to look into who was living here at that time. And for some of the people, it could be the only thing that was ever mentioned about them.
Oh, okay. I see another comment here. Is the jail you're referring to the same jail that we have here on King Street, or was it somewhere else in Cobourg?
I believe at that time, we would still be using the Amherst jail, which would be near where the county building is now. If it wasn't there, it's right around the time that they ended that jail. But I think it's still there. And that makes sense because Dr. King was hung in that area as well, I believe.
Yes, Ken
Yeah.
Strauss, could you comment on the jail situation?
Yeah, Ken?
Okay, unmuted. No, not really. I'm sorry. I don't have any particular knowledge of that.
Okay,
Go ahead, Dan.
So it's just something to research. You know, when did the jail actually move from the Amherst area into deeper into Cobourg, down by the lake, etc.? Not sure.
It says Peter Thomas. Hello, Judge Burnham. Judge Burnham is the name I believe I saw in the movie. Any relation, Anne?
Yes, we are. My husband's line of the family is descended from his brother. But Zacchaeus Burnham is a big character himself. All positive as far as I know, but he did a lot for this area.
in the Peterborough area as well.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The next question, I don't know this acronym, maybe one of you, this is Stanley Isherwood. We're expecting to open the HCHC in mid-May. Is that the Cobourg, that's the Cobourg Museum?
Yes.
HCHC.
Yeah. Traditionally, we open up the long weekend in May and are open on weekends. And then once we hit July, hopefully 5 days a week. We've applied for 2 students. And if that happens, the 2 students plus the volunteers will staff it for most of the summer. And then we'll go into weekends in September until it's showtime.
Okay. There's no other questions, so I'm going to ask Carla Jones. Well, before I do that, maybe I'll ask all the presenters, Anne, Mark, Bill, and Jenny, just to turn on your cameras so that we know who they're speaking to. So I'll ask Carla now to thank all you speakers. So go ahead, Carla.
Hi. I wanted to say how much I enjoyed seeing the video now for the second time. Back when I first saw it, I thought, how professional. And now I understand why. You're all professionals. And I must say, I must thank you for the work that you did last year putting it together, but also tonight for being here and letting us know how it was made, and of course to watch the video again in case a lot of our viewers had not seen it. I tell you, it's great the second time around, because just like a good movie, you miss a lot when you see it the first time. So that's wonderful. I found it very creative. I really enjoyed the humor. I must say, I'm thinking of Ben Lett, that picture with all the pistols as he's hanging on the boat, and then as him escaping Cobourg. So that sits in my head. And as well, the fun blurb that came out about the Attorney General in the courthouse, I thought that was fun too. Well done. So thank you. As I said, I look forward to your exhibit for this year. And I just wanted to end on this note as well too, to ask you, have you approached any of the history teachers in town to show this to the students? Because I really do believe they'd enjoy it. It's a fun way of learning history, I think. So I will just leave that with you as a thought. I'm not sure, like, as I said, if anyone has approached them, but I just think it's a wonderful idea. And I did forget to mention, by the way, early on, now it's about 8:45, but generally after the presentation, some of us will stay online the viewers will turn their cameras and audio on, and we have a bit of a social. So if you're interested in staying and hanging around for another 10, 15 minutes, please do. Otherwise, we know it's late and everyone, has to go get their, coffee, tea, or a drink of wine. I just poured mine. So, but cheers to everybody. Thank you again. Really, really enjoyable. Oh, and it looks like we have another question. So maybe Brian, why don't we just go ahead now and move into the social? We'll have everybody who wants to stay, turn on their cameras and audio, and then we can finish off the questions. How's that sound to everybody?
Well, it sounds great, but these are not questions. They're just kudos to everyone. Thanks for
good.
Thanks for excellent presentation. It was very interesting. Congratulations, everyone involved. Very well done.